Welcome to 40 Days with Jesus, and this is day 37 out of our 40 days together. And today we pick up in John chapter 20. And John chapter 20 begins this way. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw the stone that had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." Okay, so Mary Magdalene shows up at the tomb, and John doesn't give us the details about why she was there, but she shows up at the tomb, is all John tells us. And she sees that the stone is rolled away, and she recognizes that there's something's wrong. Something's wrong, so she runs back to tell Peter. Again, Peter's kind of like the head of the disciples. So goes back to tell Peter what's going on, and it says Peter. Again, John records it this way: Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved. Who do you think John's talking about? Yes, John's talking about himself. And he says Peter and John were there, and it says that in verse 3. So Peter and the other disciple, John, Peter and John started for the tomb. Both were running. Okay, now I don't know what they were running for. I'm not sure if they knew what they were running for, but they knew something wasn't the way they expected it. So they were running to the tomb, and it says that that Peter was outrun by the other disciple. Now I don't know if John's bragging or what. It just sounds funny to me. They're excited to find out what's going on with Jesus. And it says Peter and John take off running. And John says of himself that he outran Peter to the tomb. And he says when he got there, he bent over and he looked inside the tomb and saw what was going on inside the tomb. There's nothing there except for the strips of cloth that Jesus was once wrapped in. It says then Peter showed up. And he got there before Peter. But when Peter shows up, Peter arrived and went into the tomb. And he saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head. The cloth was folded up by itself, separate from the linen. And again, these are details that John seems important to tell us, that things were nicely, neatly folded up and left. And it says in verse 8, finally, the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. Let's hang there. He saw and believed. Again, I'm not sure if he even knew what he believed at that time. And verse 9 tells us that they still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. I'm not sure if he even understood what he believed, but he saw that Jesus was not there. Jesus was gone, and he believed. And again, John writes for a very specific reason. Remember what that specific reason is? John writes because he wants us to believe. He wants our faith in Jesus Christ. And John is saying here, I believed. In verse 10, it picks up, then the disciples went back to their homes, but Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." In verse 14, and at this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus. "Woman," he said, "why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking that he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Again, she thought this was probably the person who was taking care of the cemetery area or the tomb area, and she thought maybe he had, for some reason, removed the body or moved it to a different place. And then Jesus, in verse 16, says to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," or which means teacher or rabbi. And Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet returned to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them I am returning to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he said these things to her. Now again, Mary went to proclaim that Jesus was alive. The first time Mary went, she just went to proclaim that something's different. The stone had been rolled away from the tomb, but this time she has seen Jesus. She met Jesus. She touched Jesus. And she goes back and says, Jesus is alive. And I want you to hear this. Mary was the first preacher ever. She proclaimed the truth of Jesus. She was the first one to do that. Other than maybe the angel or Jesus himself proclaiming the truth, Mary was the first. And she proclaimed the truth to the disciples who at that point maybe still didn't quite believe. We're going to find out more about what the disciples' experience was with Jesus after the resurrection coming up. But I want to encourage you, maybe there's somebody in your life that you need to proclaim the truth to. Jesus has called all of us to preach. And I want to encourage you to, not all of us maybe to pastor a church, but all of us to preach. I've asked that question so many times. times. Well, who's supposed to preach? Everybody who knows Jesus is supposed to preach. We've been called to proclaim the truth of Jesus Christ to our world. So where is your world? Who is it that you're around on a daily basis? Proclaim the truth of Jesus Christ. He is alive in this Easter season. It's a great time to reach out and share with people your faith in Jesus Christ. They're ready to hear it. It's the time of year where they want to hear the truth. They want to know what Easter's about. So go out and share with them the truth. Jesus is alive. And Jesus, if he has changed your life, let people know it and share that truth with the world. Hey, this is Pastor Tony, 40 Days with Jesus, and I'll see you tomorrow.